Om Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Gukarastvandhakaro Vai Rukarastvanivartakaha Andhakara Nirodhitvat Guruthyabhidhiyate Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryankaravavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vitvisha Vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So we are coming rapidly to the end of the Karika, Sri Gaudapadacharya Ji's Karika on the Mandukya Upanishad, and it's very possible that we might even wrap it up today. We'll see. There's only 4 or 5 more verses to do. So it is good to review, if you can call it a process of awakening to our true identity with the help of the Shastra. There is a process involved. And I find that this process of awakening, the various stages of understanding and applying it to your own life and seeing yourself in the new light, all of this process goes through certain stages. And in my view, the more I think about it, this analogy of electricity going through appliances is a very useful analogy for us to understand ourselves. Beautiful analogy in the modern terms. Perhaps in that time when electricity was not prevalent, I'm sure it was even earlier. So these cycles all go. Sometimes science progresses and sometimes it ebbs and flows. But it appears that from the examples of the Vedantic acharyas in the times that we have, they didn't have this analogy of electricity. But I think in the modern terms, this is a very this is an analogy we can quickly relate to and gain from. So I will spend a few minutes just talking about that, and then we will fold it into the last few verses of the Karika. So what I was saying was that there is a certain process involved in making progress towards moksha, towards enlightenment, towards freedom, whatever you may call it. And the process goes like this. So imagine the analogy of a working computer. Okay, so here we are not talking about a cell phone, but a computer connected to electricity, directly powered by electricity. This is what I'm pointing out. So the analogy is that if you are electricity, your truth about yourself is electricity, which for the purposes of this analogy has no form, very powerful, at a different level than the appliance. Different level means that even if the appliance fails, nothing happens to the electricity. And without the electricity, appliance cannot work. And if the appliance fails, that has no effect on the electricity. So it is a higher level of functionality, of reality, or whatever you may call it. So that's the analogy. So now what happens is that in looking at the process, if your identity is that you are the electricity, initially you are unaware that you are the electricity. You enjoy the functioning of the appliance. And the appliance is functioning in a related environment with other computers, in the sense that you get emails from friends, then you respond to it, and you have both hardware and software, which is an integral part of the appliance. And there is a lot going on, as it is in the modern computer. You have so much activity, so much commonality, so much interaction, and your sense of, this is me, the computer, and I am now connected to on a social basis on Facebook and through searches, and this is the identity. Okay, so now the process. So the first stage of the process is that the electricity is really enjoying the functioning of itself as an appliance and enjoys the interconnectability, the company of others, the responsiveness. There is something going on. It is the stage. Then it's very possible that you begin, for whatever reason, you begin to question, who am I? What is my future as an appliance? Where did I come from? Who's my real friend? And in fact, more than that, just what is going to happen to me? You start to question that. And through whatever means, you come to understand that there is something funny going on. In fact, you are not just the appliance. You should now see that you are made up of two components. One is electricity and one is an appliance. And understand how the two are related to each other, and think about it. So at first you can't even think about it. You don't, you're so involved, you're so busy, and you are reasonably happy with who you are as an appliance, that this idea of electricity and appliance being separate and all of that is just a kind of like a distant concept. But if you run into some problems, this is where problems in life are very useful. then your inquiry starts to gather some momentum. And you say, what is it that you said again? So it was said again was that, there are two components and so on. Oh, I want to look into that. That sounds very interesting. Okay, look into that. And how do I look into that? Well, here are the arguments. Here are the things that don't you see that you are separate. Don't you see that even when the appliance is turned off, you are still there? Don't you see that you are, as an electricity, unaffected by time? You are never turned off, unaffected by any forms, independent of what happens in the appliances. Don't you see that? And at first we have problems in, really? That seems I can't believe that. So even the Shraddha is weak. But pretty soon that component of revelation, if you may, in your own mind, begins to take hold. And then you say, okay, now tell me exactly how does this thing work? And so then you are told, don't you see that there are two components? One is Drik and one is Drishya. And the two are completely different. Their dharmas, their qualities, their swarupas are totally different. And so you begin to see the features of Drishyatvam. This is all explained. Don't you see that the appliance is visibly seen by you? So your body-mind complex, the software-hardware combination that reflects you, well, reflection comes later, but the one that is seen by you is seen by you, which means that it cannot enliven by itself. It has to be validated by you. So this is what is called Drishyatvam. So there are 5 different aspects of that. I think we have covered it, but just to summarize it in this context. So the Drishya has Drishyatvam, means the quality of being seen. They all enjoy the same thing. It doesn't matter, so if you look at it from that perspective, you can say, listen, you are fond of expressing in your own computer. This is what your identity is. And the other computers that are connected to you are on the same level as your appliance, your computer. But all of them, including your computer, what you call your computer, in the sense that there is some connection, your computer and other computers, they all have the bhava, the quality, the dharma, the swabhava. Swabhava means the personality. I'm using words that I think you should be familiar with. Swarupa is the innate nature, and swabhava is person and personality. The personality is swabhava. And all of the personalities are drishyatvam. They enjoy drishyatvam, which is enormous consequences. So drishyatvam means now they're dependent on you. If you don't, you could just close your eyes and you don't even think about it, they disappear. This is how vulnerable they are to you. Anyway, this is called drishyatvam. Then the next one, next quality, next swabhava of all the appliances, if you may. So this is the instruction being given to the electricity, that please see, you are fundamentally different from all this. And then he said, really, I'm not so sure. Tell me. How? Okay, all right, I'll give you 5 different ways how they are completely different from you. Number 1 is drishyatvam. The second one is called bhautikatvam. Bhautikatvam means that they are made up of parts. So like a computer, though you have so many different hardware parts. There is the external one, there is the internal CPU, there is the chip. There's so much, and you cannot just have, there's no such thing as a formless computer. It's a formful computer. So bhautikatva means bhutehe jatam, born out of the various pancha mahabhutas, akasha, etc. So this is called bhautikatvam. All of them, everything in which is, all appliances have enjoy bhautikatvam. The third one is sagunatvam. Sagunatvam. Gunaha saha vartate. Sagunaha means that they are endowed by specific quality, which is a offshoot of, which is a side of bhautikatvam. And so they all have different gunas. Gunas mean different qualities. So you may have, this is exactly what happens when we go to buy the computer. Some are very powerful. This Intel chip, so they have to say, I forget the name, it's i3, i5, i7, i9, and then the memories are all different. So they have gunas. Do you want to, you go into the local shop. Unfortunately, we used to go to Fry's Electronics in Palo Alto, very close by. Now they are all out of business. But you will say, okay, show me a computer. So the salesperson will say, all right, what do you want to use it for? How powerful do you want it to be? And so you explain that, and they all have different gunas. Some are weaker, some are more powerful. All drishya have sagunatvam. Then the next one, number 4, is savikaratvam. Savikaratvam means one that have vikara. Vikara means that it is changing. And so what happens is that sometimes the computer is working, sometimes it gives you errors, and you're not sure whether it is hardware or software. This is also something we can actually spend some time expanding this and applying it. We might do some meditations on this. And so sometimes you have your computer is not functioning, but you're not sure what the problem is. And so there is savikara, means they have parts, and all parts can fail or be successful. You're not sure it's hardware problem or is it software problem. You have to run some software to discover that. And then you find, okay, no, the hardware is okay, but the software is an old one. This is what happens. I have I'm sure this happens to you, there's nothing new. But just to give you an idea, we have a HP laser printer, which is connected to my desktop, which is running Windows. And the desktop is an HP desktop. And every so now and then, the printer doesn't work at all. You say print, and you wait for this printer to start. It doesn't start. You say, what? What happened? So many things can happen. Sometimes your modem needs to be recharged. You disconnect it, and this is the biggest problem. This modem recharging. I really worry about the fact if for some right reason I'm not available. I don't know what my wife would do, because she cannot figure out what is a modem, who does it depend to, who do I call, and they all ask you, please turn it off for 2 minutes. Anyway, without going into the details, savikaritva. And so you don't know whether it's, so in going back to the printer, what I find is that there is a new version of the Windows software, and the printer driver no longer works with the new version of the Windows software. This has happened to me 2 or 3 times. And you have to find out where the driver is, go to the HP. Sometimes the problem is hardware, sometimes the software. Savikaritva. And the last one, number 5, is Agamapayitvam. Agamapayitvam means that it comes and goes. It is born and it dies. Agama means it comes. Apaya means it disappears. So just, if you look at your computer, you can say that 2 years ago I didn't have it. In fact, 2 years ago this computer didn't exist. It was still not being manufactured yet, but it was assembled and sold into a local shop, and you now plugged it in and it works. And for sure, in a few years, hopefully in a few years, not in months, it's going to stop functioning. So here, this is the second stage of the process where the drik and drishya are much more clearly shown to this one person who is having problems. What's happening to me? Because right now, me means the appliance. And you didn't even think about that you are different from it. But through the Shastra, through some wise advice, you are told, listen, you have 2 completely separate parts. So this is all about drishya. Drik has none of these things. It is never born, has no parts, it is always formless. So it doesn't have drishyatvam, it doesn't have bhautikatvam, it doesn't have sagunatvam, it doesn't have savikaritvam, it doesn't have agamapayitvam, none of that. It's a different thing altogether. So that begins to sink in. So now there is an apparent duality between drik and drishya. Then comes the third stage. So if you want to summarize it for your understanding and to telling others, you can say that this process of freedom, of moksha, has 3 stages. One stage is that everything is all one. You're not even aware of the fact that you are the electricity, you are the drik. You're only thinking about drishya as being yourself. This is stage 1. Stage 2 is where an apparent duality is understood. Duality in the sense of drik being different from drishya. Then comes the major 3 stage number 3, where now the duality of stage 2 becomes apparent duality of stage 3. Apparent duality means as though duality but no real duality. How? How is that possible? So this instruction to the student electricity. The electricity as a student is being told, listen, do you know that it is your mahima, your grandeur, your graciousness. It is in fact your reality that is functioning in the appliance. All the appliance does is to essentially reflect you. It makes you work in a given situation. But it has no electricity of its own. It enjoys your electricity. It enjoys you, Mr. Electricity, Miss Electricity. It doesn't have its own. It's all you. And in fact, it should be understood that you are the appliance without being limited by the appliance. Really? How? So this third stage is the one where more understanding, more discussion, more learning has to take place. And so you go in from stage one of singularity, not being aware of any intrinsic differences between the parts. Stage two, where there is a clearer distinction, not definition, but clearer distinction between Drik and Drishya. And the third one, where that is parlayed into non-duality. To non-duality. The non-duality means that that really you are the reality, and your expressions are apparent reality. Make us see this difference between, this is kind of like the original and the reflection. And the reflection also has some form and some, it's also moving and all kinds of things. But it is a different reality. Don't you see that? This is exactly what the instruction is. So here is a very good, so the discussion, the platform of discussion changes from Drik and Drishya Viveka to Chetana and Jada Viveka. Jada means inert and Chetana means conscious. So it is the very content of Drik Drishya. But the discussion platform is slightly different. There it was talked about the seeing things versus the seer. But here the discussion is about the reality and the non-reality, the Jada and the Chetana. And eventually morphing into that really Jada is nothing but Chetana in a formful form. That's all it is. is not an independent, you cannot define the Jada as an independent entity separate from Chetana. You cannot do that. It appears like that, but it is not really like that. So there, the instructions of Mandukya Upanishad are very relevant, very apropos. The whole approach and instruction of Mandukya with the dream analogy is very appropriate to this part of the platform of the discussion, Jada and Chetana. So very briefly, I wanted to go away. I don't know if I can finish the whole thing today, but I thought I would just explore this aspect of the teaching. If you look at dream, in the dream, and therefore because of dream, even in the waking state, because the entire Mandukya Karika is making an effort for us to see the similarity, absolute similarity. There is some minor differences. The differences are very minor, but absolute similarity between dream and the waking state. And so if we can draw the conclusions from the dream state, we can then begin to get an understanding about our waking state. So this is Ishvara's creation. You can see the hand of Ishvara and how all of this is brought together. The Mandukya is Ishvara's finest creation. So all these are what is called prakriya. Prakriya means the methodology of understanding. So really speaking, the two most important prakriyas, if you want to do that, and this is not my view, is the view of all of the acharyas that teach us, that there are two main prakriyas that we must understand very well. One is the prakriya of the dream and the avasthatrayat prakriya, which we will now revise after this whole karika is over. Avasthatrayat prakriya means that the three stages that we go through, three kind of movies as we have discussed, that we go through. And the distinction between turiya and then all the other ones. So this is one prakriya. And I'll come back to it in a minute in terms of the discussion of Jada and Chetana. The second prakriya is Panchakosha prakriya in the Taittiriya Upanishad. You should see that the outer and inner are nothing but your coverings, and there is something which is the reality which is being covered by other points, other layers, if you may, Annamaya Kosha, etc. So these are the two prakriyas, okay, that we should revisit from time to time and grasp it very clearly until it becomes fruitful for us. Anyway, going back to the Jada Chetana prakriya, there the thinking about dream is key. Why? Because in the dream and therefore in waking, every time we talk about dream, the dream is only important because it parlays its reality into the one that you are really concerned about, which is how to gain your freedom while you are beset with a sense of mortality. This is what we are all concerned about. Now, you cannot do this in dream. This is the main difference between dream and Jagrat Avastha, because in the dream, your mind is not functioning as well. It is just sort of hazy. But in the Jagrat Avastha, in the waking state, it is capable of learning, of discussing, of distinguishing, of remembering, all of that. So that's why the Jagrat Avastha is different. But for most practical purposes, the two are similar. So in terms of the Jada and Chetana distinction, what is said is, the Jada may appear to have an appearance, but upon further analysis, it should be seen that Jada, inertness, is none other than Chetana, the conscious. So, at best you can describe Jada as a Chetana which aggregates itself into a solid looking object. That's it. It is kind of like, in some ways, supposing you have an iceberg floating in the ocean, and the iceberg looks very different from the ocean, from the rest of the ocean. I remember going last year, or was it last year or 2 years ago? I forget. We took a cruise to Alaska. So my friend, our friends have been saying for a long time that we should go to Alaska. And I am not really that fond of cruises. I don't dislike it, but I'm not hankering for it. But our friend, and also now connected with marriage, because their daughter is married to our son, and we have been friends for a long time. So the Vachanis, Mohan and Nancy Vachani, so they had been asking us, let's go to the Alaska. And out of all the other ones, I thought, it'd be nice to understand Alaska's unique natural beauty. And so we agreed to do it. It was a short one. This is a year or two ago, and my wife and I and these four of us, we also wanted to just talk about our life and our children and grandchildren. We have the same common grandchildren. So that was fun. So I went to this cruise. So in one of those cruises, on one of those days on the cruise, the ship was passing through the area where there were lots of pieces of ice that had fallen off the glacier. And they were all, some were really huge, but they had all been, they were all floating in the water. So there, if you look at the water and the pieces of ice, they look very different from each other. One was very solid and accomplished in one place, put together in one place, and the other one was nice and flowing. But they are the same thing. You cannot say that, you cannot take the iceberg and the floating ice pieces away from the water. It will become water. Similarly, the Jada in the dream, and therefore the objects in my waking state are nothing but Chetana. And every time I wake up from a dream, this becomes very clear to us. My gosh, we were, you describe your dreams. I was going and then I missed the train and I was, whatever, you have some kind of a story. There is a real train that you miss. And you as a person miss the real thing as a train. Those are all jada things. They're not jada things. When you wake up, you say, oh my God, they were nothing but my consciousness. So in this third stage of the process of enlightenment, as we were discussing earlier, this focus of the platform discussion becomes an analysis of Jada and Chetana. And at best you can say that, so we talk often about Nirguna Brahma and Saguna Brahma. Nirguna Brahma is Brahman, Saguna Brahman is Ishvara. And this looks like a kind of like a theoretical, pedantic discussion. Oh, there is a Nirguna Brahma, and then there is a Saguna Brahma, and then what is the difference between them, which is better, which is... All those kinds of things happen in our minds when we are first told. Really speaking, it should be seen as your life. Your life. How? Because you are both Nirguna Atma and Saguna Atma. You are the person and the personality. And the personality may have your expression. Like a dream is your expression. And so similarly, your world of experiences is your expression. But in that sense, it is your expression. You see, it is your expression. So the word your, mine, yours is important. Because your expression doesn't mean it is separate from you. It is you that is expressing. So, for example, the water is expressing itself as an iceberg. So it is, the water can say, it's interesting, wow, this... And so if there is consciousness in the water, and the consciousness is also imparted to all of its expressions, then it is very possible that the iceberg may have a consciousness, oh my goodness, I am the iceberg. I am the biggest floating iceberg. All the other small pieces are all so small. I remember that scene when our ship was slowly sailing, and there were all these huge and small multiple pieces of ice floating on the water. And if each one of them has consciousness, if we can just extend that, they'll all be saying, I am so big. Look at these small ones. They're nothing. And the water is very happy. Very happy that my expressions are through all these Jada objects, so-called Jada objects, when in fact it is all Chetana, which is me, the water. So this is the process number 3. And now we can, don't know how much, I bet we have spent a fair amount of time. Yes, 9:14. So for sure I will not be able to complete this today, as I was hoping that I might be able to do. But this whole idea of the stages of enlightenment was explored at some depth. The idea of the appliance versus electricity was explored at some depth. And so the apparentness of the electricity and the appliance is limited in that sense. In the third stage, it may not be very limited. But in our understanding about ourselves, we should see that really speaking, the so-called jada is nothing but my own consciousness. My own consciousness coalesces, if I can use that word, coalesce. It becomes hardened as an iceberg floating around in my consciousness. But if I continue to understand that it is really nothing but my apparent expression, so there is an apparent reality to it, but I am the real reality which is never born, always there, impervious to the changes. And that's me. So this will come. This is the final stage which will come. But then I have to be, I have to deserve it. That's the word I was looking for. I have to deserve being woken up. Must be ready for it. And I must put in the work required for me to remove all the doubts about this. It's yours. You can praptasya prapti. This is the reality about it. So, in connecting it to, at least we can make some connection so that you are, I'm not talking about something different from what the Karika is communicating. So if we just go to verse number 96 and revise it, I think we started it last time, I'm not sure. Ajeshu ajam asankramtam dharmeshu jnanamishyate yatona kramate jnanam asangam tena kirtitam. So this is the culmination, as it should be, the culmination of all the previous discussion and understanding that consciousness, which is you, is the birthless, in the birthless jivas, is accepted to be birthless and relationless. Since consciousness does not contact any object, it is said to be relationless. And so this is the final analysis, that really speaking, I am independent, swatasiddha. Even when I am appear to be connected, I am not connected. And I have to see that. I have to see that for myself. I don't have to accept it from anyone. I have to equip myself with this understanding. And so, in my attitude towards, especially towards Ishvara, when I ask for help from Ishvara in my life, what the final prayer should be is, Ishvara, can you please make me independent of problems? Like you are. Can you make me independent? And Ishvara says, very happy you asked. I thought I've been waiting for it for a long time. Okay, let's work on it. I will make you capable enough so you can understand you are independent of problems. And so just as my Mahima is my graciousness, my power, it will become your power. You don't have to depend on me anymore. And for that, you should please understand you are already independent. You always have been. There was never a time. Moksha is not even a process. The process is simply to uncover your own basic nature. That's all that you need to do. If you call it a process, call it a process. But you have been birthless. Birthless means deathless. What is not born cannot die. And so you always have been that. But now I see you're getting ready to understand it. And so I bestow my help for you to keep on that path until you wake up. You may, for the time being, be beset by a dreamlike existence, and the glory of the Jagrata Avastha, of the waking state, the glory, I would say. We should not look at it as a problem, but as a glory. The glory of the waking state is that you apply the structure of the dream towards understanding the applicability of dream into your waking state. And so in that sense I would close by saying that Vedanta, and as taught by one of the greatest human teachers of Vedanta, Sri Gaudapadacharyaji. This is why this is such a important work. We say, oh, Mandukya, we've done 4, Alada Shanti, we have done, and so on. Okay, let's go to the next one. Eventually, this is what Karika, of course, is an integral part of the Mandukya. But this is why this is what is recommended. That having studied all the other Upanishads, you should now focus on the essential messages of Mandukya. Keep on focusing on it until you're done. And so in that sense, what we should do is to read this again after a few years and see how you progress in your understanding. This happens to all of us. My understanding of Karika now, especially if I'm teaching it to you, is much clearer than it was when last time I studied it. And I think this is the 3rd time or 4th time I'm studying it. And so it just sinks into you and clarifies things. But anyway, what Karika is now saying at this point, which is the basic message of Vedanta, which is this. None of your experiences of life need to be changed. None of them. They need to change in the sense that if you are wasting your time on unnecessary activities, then you should understand that time is limited in our life and that we should really focus in on the essential parts of it. That's it. But other than that, the experiences of life, or working in a family, or working in a job, and in the society and voting and all of those kinds of things and helping others and participating, etc. Nothing of that has to be changed. Nothing. What has to be changed is your conclusions about it. That's it. You should see it is a reality. It's exactly like a play. You should, while you are in the play, so this is exactly the message of Bhagavad Gita was to Sri Krishna's advice to Arjuna. It's just like, don't stop the play, but utilize your participation in the play to understand that this is just a play. Which will take a while, because right now it looks like the only thing in town. But you have an identity separate from the play. This is the whole thing about electricity and appliance. The appliance is a play, changing. The electricity is not a play. It's at a higher level altogether. And so number 96 basically says this, that really speaking, please see that you do not come into real any contact with any Jada object, because the Jada objects are nothing but you, the consciousness. It's like saying, please do not feel the waves should not feel, the water should not feel that it's in contact with the iceberg. Hey, that doesn't, what are you talking about? It is the iceberg. How can it be in contact? If you want to say, the flowingness of the water is in touch with the solidity of the iceberg, yeah, you can say that if you want to. That's just saying things. Anyway, so that is the basic message of verse number 96. So with that I close the class, and now I can promise almost, hopefully, that in the next class with the verses number 97, 98, 99 and 100, we will indeed end the Alata Shanti Prakaranam, and therefore the entire Karika, and therefore the entire Mandukya and Karika together next week. And then we will embark, I think, on a useful view of a summary of all of it from a conceptual perspective. I don't know how long that might take, so allow me to have that freedom. I cannot say it will be done in 2 or 3 days, because I think it might be good to spend some time in taking a solid conceptual view of the whole thing, starting from the beginning of the Mandukya. And so that might take a little while, and then we'll be done. So with that, I close the class today. Om Swasti Prajabhyah Paripalayantam Nyayena Margena Mahim Mahisha Go Brahmanebhya Shubhamastu Nityam Loka Samastha Sukhino Bhavantu Kale Varshatu Parjanyaha Prithvi Sasya Shalini Desho Yam Kshobarahitaha Brahmana Santu Nirbhaya Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dukha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Satkamaya Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma amritam gamaya. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Okay, let me see if there are anybody questions. So Suvarna says, Bhaskar is asking, is it that we should understand, apply yatha drashtihi tatha srishtihi? This requires more explanation and in fact some questioning on my part to you. What you mean by this drishti and srishti and so on. It has some technical aspects to it which it is inappropriate for me to discuss now. What Bhaskar, what I request you to do is to send me an email explaining your understanding of what you mean by drashti and srishti and all of those kinds of things. And then I will reply to you giving my view of it. So let's do it that way. Okay. So good that some of the people, Zarina, you must have just had the class with Swami Tattvavidananda ji and you were able to join. That's good. Kirsten, so nice to have you again. There was a new name that I saw, Neelakant Koranne. So I don't know who you are. If you could please send me an email to introduce yourself, I would be very happy to welcome you to it. But anyway, I'm happy that you're here. Sanjeev, good to see you. Lakshmi, can you tell me how you're doing? Please send me an email about your health and recovery and all that. Please let me know. Vikram, Satish, Jaya, Arvind, Sridhar. Arvind Chitale. Is that a new name? Not familiar with it. So Arvind, if you could also please send me something, I would appreciate it. Doesn't look like there's another question. So with that, I take your leave and we will see you next week. Om.